Welcome back to the Marty and Jaden Show, and today we're answering the question, if you've seen Dune, should you also go back and read the book?
We have just seen the movie. Jaden just saw the movie a week ago. I've seen the movie before. I loved it. Had to read the book. Had to get Jaden to read the book. And so that's what we've done over the past week. So we're going to go into those things. We're going to talk about how much we enjoyed the movie and how much we're enjoying the book so far.
Surprising answer there. I honestly thought it's a super old book. Not going to be something I get into. We'll talk a lot about the book, some of the differences there. But first, you're right. We have to start with, what do we actually think about this movie?
And before we get there, this is the book we're talking about. Beautiful cover. Absolutely loves that thing. I just wish the movie poster looked just like that. It'd be amazing.
Well, did this come out anytime recently? I mean, this has to be a pretty old cover, and the movie's not that old.
It is not. I don't think it's an old cover. This is a new cover. So this is a new
they changed
edition
it from
cover.
the movie. Okay, yep. Interesting.
So it's
they also
great.
changed the audiobook. Is basically the movie cover.
It is. I know. It kind of bothers me when I see that because I'm like, I know what the movie looks like. I just want to see.
Did you go audiobook with this one, or did you read the book?
The audiobook.
Because you have the book. You brought it with you.
I did read some of the book, but I did mostly audio.
Okay, it's kind of hard to catch up. We read this in like a week, so there's a lot to get through.
First half of this book, we read up until where the movie ended.
Yeah.
And we're going to continue from there. So, Jaden, what did you think about the movie?
I was going to say, it takes a heck of a lot less time to watch a movie than to read 34 chapters of a relatively long book.
Yeah, what is that movie, like 2.5 hours long?
It's actually not bad. It was really good. It was a great movie. I think I watched it with a little bit more focus than I normally would in a movie, just because there's a lot going on. It's a new world.
Because this was your second chance to try watching this movie.
I did watch it when it came out years ago, and I watched it again like last week, 2 weeks ago, and it was completely different. The first time, I remember talking to you after that because we watched the movie, and I was like, honestly, not a huge fan. And you're like, what are you talking about? I love that movie.
I was devastated when you said that. I'm like, this is an amazing movie.
Well, it was one of those things where I came out of the theater and I was like, I just feel like I missed 75% of what was going on in that, and I don't like that feeling like stuff's just going over my head, and I can't really dive into it because I'm like, what's the deal? Like, how many different people are there here? What does Sardaukar even mean? Is that a person? Like, everyone's wearing a similar shade of brown weapons suit, and I don't know who's who. Everyone looks the same. So that was a big set of confusion for me. But this last time I watched the movie, a week ago, that was so much better. Because I went into it thinking, okay, I need to really, really pay attention the first 5 to 10 minutes, get an idea of who's who the different people are, and then from there, I was way better. I was like, night and day difference.
Yeah.
I loved it.
So what did you love about it?
I liked that I could get into the politics of it. That's one of the things that I really like. We talk about Sanderson a lot. I really like Oathbringer. I like the more political, discussion books, and I think this does a really good job of that. Even the movie does a really good job of the politics of it, the frustrations, the angst. That was one of the things I really liked.
I remember, so I hadn't read the book either before watching the movie for the first time, and the movie just did such a good job at conveying such a sense of something is wrong about this whole situation and just feels eerie. They make the whole point in the movie that it feels like they're walking into a trap, which makes the whole story, the whole movie just feel like a tragedy. You're watching a tragedy unfold.
And it happens fast in the movie. There's not much lead up to the fact that they're on Arakis. Pretty immediate. Yeah. And then everything starts blowing up. If you haven't seen the movie, you really need to watch it. But this is going to be quite the spoiler for you. So they get to Arakis and everything explodes. That happens so fast in the movie. I think one thing that I didn't necessarily like about the movie is it does feel like there's not a whole lot of build, plot build. I don't want just filler for filler's sake, but there's just so much they had to pack into that movie that it feels like they're just all of a sudden boom, they're on Arakis, boom, they just got totally wiped out, and then now they're in their what is it? Thornicopter, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
They go into that, and then they're blown up in the sand. It's there's a lot going on, and it's happening so fast. So it's either really, really slow or just massive plot points.
So this is where it kind of starts blending into the book. Didn't you not feel that way in the book, though? That it starts getting there pretty quick? Like, oh my gosh, like we're already there.
I didn't feel that way in the book. I really think that the book did a good job of prepping you beforehand. I think one of the things that is different in the book, I guess we're making that transition now into the actual reading, is that the Baron discusses his whole plan, like right at the beginning.
Oh, isn't that fascinating? The book doesn't even, it's not like it's Frank Herbert who writes this book. He doesn't leave you guessing of what's going to happen. He tells you everything. It blew my mind when I read this book. I'm like, oh, they tell you that Yui is going to be the one betraying everyone from the very beginning.
The whole time, and you like hear his thoughts about like why he's doing it, what he's going to do. It's wild. But you learn about the reasons that the Baron's trying to like ruin everything, like who he's going to put in place on all of that stuff. Like it's Peter. Piter, there it is.
Piter the Mentat.
Yes. And so he's like, I'm going to put him in place. Like, this is everything that's going to happen. This is my whole plan. It's how much it's going to cost me. Like, how I'm going to convince the Emperor. Yeah. And you're like, wow, that's your whole plan. Yeah. that's the villain laying out his plan. But probably in a better way than your standard villain explaining his plot.
Yeah, he's not explaining it to the good guy. He's explaining it to his successor.
Yeah, while he's captured. That's always funny.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I liked that a lot. The whole idea of like you kind of just hate Yui because of like the looking in the past.
I still hate him.
Yeah, like it's just horrible. Like just like I can't believe that he's doing that. And anyways, it's crazy.
And then what I didn't realize, there's actually quite a few differences. I thought they did. So one of the big things about the movie, and a lot of people said this, is that they did such a good job blending into the book and make sure everything's in the book.
This was my comment. When he says people, like that is my thoughts.
A lot of people said that.
Let me tell you my thought, and then you can jump into it.
Go ahead.
I thought the book was so close to the movie and like so almost word for word
with
the movie and book.
Yep.
That I was like, this is almost boring, this first half, because I've seen it all like so closely and so closely aligned. I was like, I just can't wait to see what happens next.
Okay,
like that's where I felt.
Riddle me this though. You know nothing about what a mentat is in the movie.
Oh yeah, they don't go into that at all.
That's huge. Yeah. Like a massive part of the book.
Yeah.
Like they talk about that. They talk about how Paul's technically been training this whole time to be a mentat, what they do, how they do what they do. I think the fact that like this whole society has stemmed from the fact that like thinking machines used to exist.
Yep.
And then they stopped using them because of like some tragedy or some terrible reason. Like they had to stop using them. Like that's like 2 steps past where we are right now. Yeah. We're just inventing those thinking machines.
Isn't that crazy though? This book was written like what in the 1950s or 70s? It was 70s?
Herbert was 70s. I don't know if the book was written in the 70s.
Oh my gosh. I'll have to look at that while you're chatting. But yeah, because I mean, even the 70s though,
long ago enough that
like people wouldn't even think that's a possibility like 3 years ago.
And it's already in the past in this book. But yeah, that's something that we're working on right now is machines that can think.
1965.
Okay, so right in between the 50s and the 70s.
We're good at averages.
That's why we're both on this show.
That's right.
But I do think that was something that I really liked that I wish they talked more about in the movie because that's so relevant. I feel like that would have been a great thing to put into the movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Who's it? Thufir Hawat is the mentat for Paul and the Atreides.
Yeah, Hawat's the mentat for Paul. Yeah.
Yep. And he is the person, if I remember right, he's the old guy, like the old general-looking guy.
With the white eyes.
With the super white eyes that like he throws them back to calculations.
Yeah.
So are they, this is a part that I didn't quite catch the first time that I read, and this time I was like, are they thinking machines or are they human?
No, they're people.
Yeah.
They are people.
But he basically calls them a thinking machine at one point. They call Piter a thinking machine.
Basically. So the concept is that instead of allowing machines to think, and which was like thinking for humans, and then humans like society degraded basically, they now say, okay, we need that same thing for society to run now, but we have to make people do it. So it's like a genetic mutation, basically.
Oh, fascinating.
That allows them to just quickly make calculations. Yeah. And there's different types of mentats, too.
Wow, dude, you picked up a lot more than I did.
It was such a cool difference. I thought it was a sweet
Okay, well,
nuance.
then give me this then. So what was your thought overall of the book? How do you like it so far?
I really like it.
Yeah.
I think they did a great job of it. I think there are some parts that I'm like, ooh, that's a little dark for me.
Yeah, I know. There's a few parts I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, like I did not like that.
No.
But overall, I think it's really good. I think I'm surprised often, and you usually convince me to read books, to be fair. I'm surprised often how much I enjoy the story of a book. Because sometimes you're like, okay, it's long. You know, it's a 20-hour read or however many hours to like listen to.
Yep.
And then you just, sometimes you're like a 3-hour movie just seems to make more sense. I can just fit that into my life so much better. But you get really sucked into a story. And I think it's a great story to get sucked into. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of crazy stuff happening. And I think it's fun.
I'm so glad that you felt this way about the book. As I felt this way too. I just took away just so much of this book just felt so like deep for me and like deeply like connected me to the book. More later in the book. I can't get there yet. But
like, take it easy.
I know. Come on. What am I doing?
You've read the whole book. I haven't. Okay, so plot-wise, let's dive into some of the things that we especially liked about the book. One of the things for me, right at the beginning, I really liked Leto. Like his concept, his like abilities. He dove right in to going to Arakis, knowing that it was going to probably be the end.
Okay, and I have to get here before we move on from it because they're coming from the planet Caladan. Mm-hmm. Sanderson has to have ripped straight out of Dune for his character name of Caladan, and then I feel like there was another name too that
it's
like,
Caladan though.
It's Caladan.
Yeah, see, so it's completely different.
See, but I do know that Sanderson was a major fan of Dune, one of his favorite books.
Wow,
which is crazy. So
do you know if he read all of them? Or just
I am not sure on that.
I'm sure he read all of them, but
he may not have.
I hear from a lot of people they get pretty weird as you go.
I know.
Further down.
Half of people that I talk to say like, I love the whole series. And then the other half is like, dude, there are fish people in the later ones. It is super weird. I'm like, okay, I don't know if I'm going to read more or not, but
I might do it now because I'm more curious about the fish people than anything else.
I know, right?
I think there's. So I want to talk.
So let's go back to Duke Leto.
Yeah, I want to go to Leto.
I love the Duke Leto. He is one of my favorite characters. I love how they talk about his like abilities as a father figure, but also as a leader, and his ability to lead men. And he cares more about men than power, but with power though as well. But anyways,
I like the concepts of their house in general. They seem very honorable. I like the fact that Paul is able to say later, like, no Atreides has ever broken this vow of honor.
Yep.
That's kind of cool. Like the line of honor and trust, all that stuff. Yep. I also think I like the fact that he's kind like to his family, but also just stone cold sometimes when he needs to be.
Yeah.
I wonder if Jessica or Paul mentioned this later, but like there's two completely different sides of him.
Yeah, it was
like
Jessica.
The calm, cool, collected, like military leader, basically.
Yep.
And then like the loving father and husband. I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. You know,
yeah.
Like, you contrast that with the Baron, who's just absolutely brutal all the time. Terrible person.
Dark. Yeah.
Very, very dark. But it's one of those things where you end up just like, man, you know it's going to end poorly because they say that right at the beginning and you just feel so bad.
Yeah. Well, it's because I actually really like that each beginning of each chapter heading is like a history book written looking back at how things were.
Which also reminds you a little bit of how Sanderson likes to do his books.
Exactly.
The little intro snippets.
Yeah. And it just gives you a sense of like, okay, something went successful eventually to have like this history, but it's almost more of like a religious text, the way that it's written too.
Yeah, it's like conversations with the Mujahideen or something like that.
Yeah, Moadib.
It's hard to remember how to say all these names because like you listen to it and you're like, yeah, I know these names, and then you go to say it and you're like, oh, I'm not pronouncing that correctly.
It doesn't help though that the audiobook is kind of whack. Like, so the audiobook's really good, but it is wild at the same time because I don't know who designed this thing and decided like when people were going to talk where, and it has different people, voice actors for different parts of the book.
And different people narrating.
And one person narrating the whole time, I think. But he decides sometimes to read someone's like text and dialogue, and then other times people will randomly jump in and do the voices for like the text being read. It is super confusing if you didn't know that ahead of time.
And the fact that they're just all of a sudden is like loud music.
Yeah.
You're like, whoa.
It's like something intense is going on.
At like the end or the beginning of a chapter, I'm like, okay, this gets a little loud. Like a little bit much as far as ambiance goes. But I think they did a good job of turning it into more, I guess, trying to be entertaining, trying to make it more.
I do like the voice acting for the most part. I just wish they used the voice actors more for some, like they just.
You just think that they don't commit enough to it?
No, like they did that. Like I said, the narrator jumps in like halfway and like does the voice for some of them. I'm like, okay, I actually really like the Duke Harkonnen. What do they call him? The Baron Harkonnen.
Baron, yeah, just the Baron is what they call him usually.
The Harkonnen, yeah, but his voice. It sounds like Darth Vader, the same guy who does the voice of Darth Vader.
Sounds pretty evil.
James Earl Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not his voice. And I was just I was literally thought it was the same voice actor because his voice is so similar. But he sounds like Darth Vader, and it's really, really cool.
I think they did a good job of all of them. I really like the fact. So, okay, one thing, and we might be jumping a little bit. We'll come back as we need to, but the voice is a big element of it, and that's completely different.
And he's talking about not voice actors here. He's talking about like the voice.
The voice, yeah.
Like the power of the voice.
Of the Bene Gesserit, yeah. Yes. The power they have is just a calm, collected voice.
Yes.
That's very different than like the guttural sound they have in the movie.
Yes, the movie doesn't... I see why the movie did what it's doing.
Because they have to make it different, because you can't imagine it as much. You know? But I liked it better in the book for that reason. Yeah. I liked how much explanation they give to what the Bene Gesserit is. Mm-hmm. I think that's a good point overall for the book. It's the fact that you can spend a chapter on backstory. Like, you know what a Bene Gesserit is. You know why it was crazy that Paul was born. He should not have been born, because you shouldn't have males as Bene Gesserit.
Yep.
Every time they've had a male, they've tried to, give him the truth power, and it kills him.
Yep.
So it's like, you're supposed to have females, like that's all planned. You don't know who your parents are when you're a Bene Gesserit, because they like marry people around, and then you find out who their parents are. You're like, what the heck happened? Like, it's a crazy story, but you don't get those reveals. You don't get those payoffs later in the book if you're watching the movie and you don't have the backstory for it. Like, you don't know how wild it is that Yue was the traitor.
Yeah,
like how
you don't get that at
all.
Nobody
Nobody believed that he was the traitor, and you're like, why did nobody suspect this guy, or at least like someone watch him, Yep. But everyone was like, he's been imperially trained. Yep. And you learn in the book, conditioned, yeah. You learn in the book that when you're imperially conditioned, that's it. Like, you cannot, under any circumstances, break that conditioning.
And which means you can't break your word. You're not going to betray anyone.
Yeah, exactly. That's why you're the servant, you're the doctor, and I guess that makes sense. Like, you want someone who you're giving pills to, you're like, it's not going to kill you in your sleep. But the Baron was able to find a way to break that conditioning, and he doesn't tell anyone about it, because it's like, obviously it's a huge deal to break the conditioning of an imperial, like servant, imperial, whatever.
Yep.
I think that was a crazy part that you would just have no idea if you only watched the movie how that works.
Yep.
So
I like that part a lot too. One part that does kind of bother me about the whole thing, though, I'm like, okay, is it really just that his wife was taken by the Harkonnens and that's what broke him? I'm like, has no one ever tried that before?
That was it, though.
I know. I wasn't, but I was just like, come on. Like, I feel like that's
not that much of a secret.
Like, yeah, I'm like, okay, of course, but
yeah, it's like, oh, they got him. Hostages. That's the way.
Yeah, exactly. Just like threaten to torture someone you love. So horrible. Yeah. So what else? So is there anything else that stood out to you in the book?
A couple of nuances, and we don't have to get into a ton of them. Like some of the little things. Like Duncan Idaho is actually, he becomes a Fremen. Like they come in and they say, you can be a Fremen, and he's like, yeah, I accept. And he becomes one. Like, that's not something you really get a sense of. You're like, oh, they're friends, but he actually becomes a legitimate Fremen. That's cool.
Yep.
The whole Chris knife concept for me is cool.
Yeah.
I guess that's more than a nuance. The concept that these knives are so sacred. Like, Duncan grabs the knife and he's like, check out this knife. And the guy yells from the door. He's like, do not unsheath that knife.
Are you kidding me?
And they're like, whoa, take it easy. But it's this big deal. Like, you cannot sheath an unbloodied Chris knife.
Yep.
Like, there's so many little things. Maybe they could have woven that into the movie a little bit better. But that's different. Like, even the fact that he gets a knife in the movie for his duel with Jameis, or whoever he duels with.
Yeah, Jameis.
Like, even the gift of that knife would be so much different and so much more, I guess, impactful if you knew how important these Chris knives were. Like, no Chris knife has ever left Arakis. Ever.
Yeah. Huge.
And what didn't the Baron say there was 1,000,000 Solari bounty? If someone could give him a Chris knife.
Yeah.
It's like all of these little things were like, no one has ever left with one. You can only have one if you abide by the honor of the rules. It's kind of cool. Like, they have a very, very deep society.
Yep. That's what I loved about the whole book. It's very deep. Like I was saying in the beginning, there's a lot to the story. It's very political. And speaking of, that's what I wanted to ask you next about, is the whole scene at the dinner and what you thought about that. But before I ask you about the dinner, fun fact about how the first movie failed when they made a movie Dune back in the
old movie.
Oh yeah, we're talking like the 1980s or 90s or something like that. They tried to make the movie Dune because everyone liked the book. Of course, got to make a movie, right?
Yep.
I haven't seen the movie, but one of the big reasons why it failed in the first place is because the book is actually pretty fascinating. I think it's called third person omniscient. Yeah. Where you're able to hear everyone's thoughts and and what's going on, which makes the political scenes super cool because
Yeah.
you're hearing everyone's thought processes and why they're saying certain things. But it doesn't work very well if you try it in a movie. And that's what they did.
Oh, they did that.
They did. So you're hearing people's thoughts in the background, like as they're talking. It's just cheesy and weird. And so did not work at all. So
Dang, I see what they're trying to do because that's an important part of the book.
Yeah.
But I guess that's the element of, you make a movie about a book, you have certain limitations.
yeah,
just
you have
can't
to make
do.
changes to like get the same feel. And that's what I feel like this director of Dune does so well. You just get this feeling of how immense and massive the whole story is, the whole world, the whole moment. He just does an awesome job just conveying the feeling of Dune when you're watching the movie.
It's expansive. Like you can tell the universe is a big deal. I think you learn a lot more in the book. I just keep going back to like the context, the nuance.
Yep.
One of the things that's like a big plot point for me though was the fact that everyone thought it was Jessica.
Yeah,
Who was the
huge.
traitor. And like that's not even mentioned in the movie.
Isn't that like heartbreaking too? That he has to let it like go. Like he's like, yeah, I have to let him think that I think Jessica did it. And
It's crazy.
and that to me, that's just heartbreaking. I'm like,
Yeah.
the love, like person that you love, like the love of your life. You're like, yeah, I gotta let her think that I'm betraying, that she thinks that I think that she's betraying me.
It's wild. The whole story, that element of it, and the fact that Hawat is like convinced, even to the end. Like he's like, it's definitely her. I'm 100% sure. And then when it actually happens, he's like, yeah, now I know for sure. I'm like, but he's the calculator guy. What is he doing? He's not even thinking about it. She tries to convince him, but she did not.
I know. So what did you think about the dinner scene?
The dinner scene.
When they're meeting up with everyone at the table. I just thought this was a cool scene. So
Okay, tell me why you thought it was cool first.
Everyone is meeting at the dinner table. You've seen Paul and the Duke and the people who's the banker and the guy who makes the still suits. And like everyone's meeting together. Is this ringing a bell?
Yeah, but I want to hear why you like.
Oh
liked
yeah,
this.
yeah.
I
Okay,
feel like it was pretty average.
I was
Okay.
like, you're not hearing this? I don't know. I just thought the whole scene was cool because you're starting to hear the political comments from every single person. All of the slight comments that they have that are just veiled in like different messages for each other and just saying like I don't know, just like all of those things. I want to say an example, but I'm gonna mess it up. And so
like all the people that just didn't care. They're like, okay, well, it's your problem. Or like, how are we just gonna worry about this?
But everyone feels threatened with some comments, and they're getting upset. And then it's like, I can't believe you're saying this. And he's like, well, like I'm the Duke's son, and he's showing like his maturity.
He does
and
a good.
that.
I think in general, he surprises people across the board, and I think they did a good job of that in the movie. I think he's a very regal son, even though he's.
But all of this is
young.
to say, though, is it believable for I don't live in the world of politics, but do you think that people really do make comments that are just like super veiled and threatening towards someone just straight up to their face, but it's like coded in like a metaphor? And like, why wouldn't you just straight up say it if you're threatening them anyways? Like is there any reason to veil the threat? Like
I think potentially there's the reason would be that you can justify the reason for saying what you did, and then other people, when they're listening to it, third parties can justify that.
Yeah.
The biggest threat across the entire universe of Dune is the fact that all of these individual factions and lower houses and all these things, minor houses I think they're called, if they were to band together, they would be a formidable force. But the fact that all of these little trifles happen one-on-one, like the Harkonnens and the Atreides, is a massive battle. But the reason it succeeded is because he was able to isolate the Atreides from all the minor houses. And that was part of the dinner, is like the fact that Paul is really frustrated. Like all these minor houses just couldn't care less about them going to Arakis to probably die.
Yeah.
He's like, why aren't they helping us? Why aren't they doing this? Why don't you put out a statement and like force them to listen to us, or force them to give their loyalty or something like that? And he's like, well, he can't do that because then it would, weaken our house name, or it would weaken our other alliances. So there's a lot of reason to tread lightly, and a way that they tread lightly is they like encode their villainous statements.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I like that. That makes more sense for me, because sometimes I'm like, do you need the encoding? But makes sense.
No, it's a crazy part of all of the political movies and books, but I think it's interesting, at least.
It's fascinating.
Yeah,
it's really fascinating. Any last thoughts on the book?
I think I really am excited to see the rest of the book. And what's crazy, the last thought I'll have, I think, is the fact that the movie really just ends. And I'm like, I always thought that was just how the first book ended. What I never knew is that it's just half of the first book.
Yep.
There's 6 books. So the fact that they had that entire movie and it's just half of the book.
Yep.
So now we have to finish the first book in the second movie. I'm really excited to see where that goes. I'm excited to talk to you about like what we think is going to happen, where we think they're going to go with the second movie.
And we haven't gotten to this part, but it's not a spoiler, I swear. But it actually ends at the perfect spot because the book jumps forward like 6 years or something like that, or maybe 2 years or something like that. So it jumps forward a few years.
So all of that like teaching of him of the Fremen ways and all those things is like happens in that space.
I guess so. Like you just say it just jumps forward that time jump and then you're just continuing on from there. And so I don't want to get too far into it because I don't want to spoil movie or book and everything.
There's a lot of excitement that's still coming out, but I'm excited to read it for sure.
Yeah. So I guess all that to say is the spot in the movie where they stop actually makes a lot of sense for why they would stop right there.
Interesting. So, okay, we had the question right at the beginning of the episode. Now we have to answer it. If you watched Dune, especially if you liked it, should you go back and should you read the book? What would you say?
I would say definitely.
I would echo that just resoundingly. Say absolutely. If you have the time between now and when the second movie comes out, you will gain so much of knowledge about the world of Dune. And I think the best part of that is that knowledge just helps you understand the movie better. They do a good job of making those characters accurate to the book and the plot of the book. You just miss the backstory. You miss that context. Even though it still applies to the movie, it just doesn't exist. So you have to, it's like reading the libretto. I guess that's probably not a very common.
Nope.
It's like reading the little pamphlet they give you when you go to like an opera or some other sort of theater play. It gives you that context of characters and their story because they can't just read that off to you at the beginning. It's similar to a movie. They can't just read to you all of these little things about people's backstory and what a Bene Gesserit really is. Read the book, learn that stuff, and then when you watch the movie, you'll be like, oh my goodness, I love that.
See how everything's going.
You have to read the book. That's like, it's going to be almost just to make your enjoyment of the movie that much better.
Yeah, I completely agree. You'll just get a lot more context. Mm-hmm. You'll understand the masterfulness of Denis, I don't even know how to say his last name, of the director of Dune, and how the movie just is perfect for the impact and tone that the book is trying to convey. And you will just get all of that, but in the book as well.
There you go. So there's our answer. If you have seen the movie already, definitely go back and read the book, especially before the second movie comes out. That's going to be our major recommendation for this Dune. And there will be plenty of not only prediction, but reaction videos coming out from us about Dune, the movie, about the rest of the book, and all things related to it. We love doing that on this channel, so if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe, like the video if you liked it, if you got any value from it, and we'll see you in the next one.